Hi, I'm Jaidev and I'll be presenting our paper Automated Dense Soundtrack Construction for books using movie adaptations. Now we know that soundtracks play a key role in pop culture. In fact, the image here probably reminds you of the iconic Jaws theme that plays right when the scary great white appears on screen. And Jaws isn't really alone. A bunch of movies have similar moments and iconic motifs or theme songs. And it's not just movies, it's also games, which use soundtracks quite effectively to amplify the story. But one area where we haven't really seen soundtracks is books. So in this paper, we attempt to solve just that. Let's build a soundtrack for books. But before diving in, we should probably answer a few questions. First, how do we begin? Well, given the absence of large data sets in this space, which relate a book and a soundtrack, we thought it would be appropriate to begin with books that have a movie adaptation and consequently a movie soundtrack. Hence, we could simply transfer the movie soundtrack over to the book. Now, in this process, we want to be mindful of a few things. We want to ensure that the narrative moments in the book, the emotion that's depicted in the book, as well as any potential motifs that are possible, are reflected in the soundtrack. And most importantly, we want to ensure that the soundtrack plays for the entirety of the reading duration. In order to know we've done a good job, we feel it's super important to ask actual users to read the book and give us their feedback, all the while checking for plot alignment and emotional alignment. Now, in the past, there have been some prior work on building a soundtrack for books or text, but they differ from our work in a few key aspects. Most prior work operate at a paragraph level, where they consider sentences or few sentences together, but as a result lack a global understanding of the entire piece. Our work, in contrast, looks at the book as a whole and hence has an understanding of the overarching storyline. As a result, our soundtrack is not only suited for the book, but is extremely narrative aware. Now, in line with prior work, we build an emotionally relevant soundtrack by using emotion cues, but we go a step further to ensure musical cohesion. As a result, the soundtrack we create sounds like it belongs to the same universe and can greatly improve immersion. We'll segment this discussion into 3 parts. First, we'll discuss how we handled each modality. A book is quite long, same for the movie and same for the soundtrack. So our first goal is to break it down into smaller chunks that makes processing easier. Second, we will proceed to how we relate each modality with each other. And finally, how we put everything together to build our soundtrack. First, we break each modality into separate, narratively cohesive, emotionally cogent segments by using different segmentation techniques for each modality. For music, we extract key strength, which captures the tonal properties of the soundtrack, and compute a self-similarity matrix on that. Finally, we use the self-similarity matrix to compute a novelty curve, where the peaks on this curve indicate potential breakpoints for the musical track. In the end, the final music segments that we obtain are pretty unified in terms of style or emotion or any other properties. Now, for text, we do something similar, where we create text chunks, which are simply portions of a large chapter that we've broken down, where each chunk is unified by a certain narrative theme, such as the characters present, the plot point, or the emotion. And we accomplish this by clustering sentences together based on embeddings that we obtain for these sentences. Similarly, for the movie, we aim to break the movie into various scenes, where we cluster images or frames together based on visual similarity. You can see a few examples on screen. Great, so far we have segmented each modality into smaller chunks, which will greatly help with processing. But now we aim to build relations between these. Once again, the ultimate goal is to match book segments with music segments, and we can do this by using movie scenes as an intermediary. To align the book and the movie, we aim to match chapter segments with certain movie scenes. And we have a few cues that we can use to do this. First, we have dialogues that appear in the book and in the movie in a similar form. Second, we have characters that appear in the book that also co-occur together in the movie in particular scenes. And finally, we have descriptions of the scenes themselves, where the book would simply describe something that's visualized in the movie. Hence, we use a certain multimodal approach here to align the book and the movie and obtain a chapter to scene mapping in the end. To align the movie and the soundtrack, we simply use Shazam, where we match every few seconds in the movie with the song using Shazam. Naturally, due to background noise or other dialogues, we do not always have a match, but that's not really an issue. Finally, now we can put everything together to build a soundtrack. The image here is pretty instructive. We have a single book segment, a single movie scene, and a single track that we have already segmented previously using key strength. Hence, we can simply use transitivity here to match the book segment with a movie segment. Now, since we want something that is emotionally coherent, we add emotion labels to the book and the music to ensure alignment in that aspect as well. Now, note that we also use emotion-based retrieval in the event that we have no narrative cue. Say, for example, a book segment isn't really visualized in the movie at all, which is possible for many adaptations. In that event, we fall back to emotion-based retrieval in line with prior work. Now, to put everything in perspective, we have a book with multiple chapters, each chapter which we've broken down into smaller segments. Now, for each book segment, we have a song segment from the soundtrack, which we've retrieved using narrative and emotion cues. Now, how does the user experience this? Well, as the reader begins to read a book segment, the corresponding song segment will automatically play in the background and loop indefinitely. As a result, our soundtrack is invariant to a user's reading speed. Now, the key component here is how we put everything together. So as the reader moves on to a new book segment, we automatically crossfade to a new song. This not only ensures a continuous, uninterrupted listening experience, but it also ensures that musical transitions aren't really abrupt. Here's a quick demo to give you a sense of our soundtrack. Now, at the end of our process, we wanted to get some actual feedback on how our technique did. So we asked 10 users to read 2 chapters of Harry Potter with the corresponding soundtrack we built and asked for some feedback. And here are some takeaways. Nearly all participants said that the soundtrack greatly improved immersiveness. This is quite promising and simply shows the potential of such an application. Many also said that the music helped them focus, which is interesting as music does help many focus while studying, so it's interesting to see a similar outcome for fiction. Many also said that the music helped them appreciate emotional overtones, which is quite interesting as we not only used emotion-based matching, but narrative-based matching, which we believe has the potential to create a better experience. Finally, many also said that the music mirrored narrative transitions. This is quite interesting as movies often use soundtracks quite effectively to foreshadow events. And it's quite interesting that we are able to replicate such a feature. Now, obviously, some of these considerations or takeaways can be used for future work on building a book-length soundtrack, even if the exact technique differs. Specifically, how we can use narrative-specific music and motifs to help visualize or realize a new world. Obviously, this technique only works for books that have movie adaptations. Future work can avoid this limitation by potentially using generative models to build a soundtrack. And that's it. If you're interested, please do check out our project page at the URL listed and feel free to demo the final chapter of Harry Potter as well.